In 1917, the state legislature chartered the Florida Museum of Natural History at the University of Florida. It is the state's official natural history museum dedicated to understanding, preserving, and interpreting Florida's biological diversity and cultural heritage. Today, it is home to more than 28 million fossils and specimens, helping us to understand our past and also helping us to understand our future.
There's a lot to see and a lot to learn at the Florida Museum of Natural History. Millions of things, covering millions of years. Lessons on creatures and cultures lost long ago to the sweep of history, and those we can still learn from today firsthand. The story of our past, our present, and perhaps our future. But before we can learn from our history, we need to learn our history. Not an easy task when you're looking back 20 million years.
Personally, I've just always been fascinated with things that are primitive and atavistic, and also things that are secret and mysterious, which is the way fossils are found. Typically, you have something that you don't understand what it is. It's not complete. It's part of a jigsaw puzzle. And that's what attracts scientists, I think, to well, lots of aspects of science, but paleontology. It's just this big jigsaw puzzle, and most of the pieces are gone. You have to try and make sense of what's left.
The museum is in a good position to do just that because of the extensive research it conducts in many scientific disciplines and shares in its permanent exhibits.
This museum is unique because we have about 28 million scientific specimens and objects, artifacts in our collections. And that puts us right up there with the American Museum of Natural History, the Smithsonian, the top four or five natural history museums in the United States of America. So our scientists are doing research. We have these vast collections.
We have a really large and well-known research and collections program at the museum, most of which is behind the scenes. So you can't really see what's happening as researchers are doing their work, but we can present the results of their work in the exhibitions.
There are a lot of results to display, at least in part because of Florida's unique physical environment and the fossilized secrets it keeps.
Florida is especially good for some of these things because, largely because of the sinkholes, because of the karst topography, where you have these holes in the ground all over the place that act either as traps for living animals or just sort of as drain traps, if you will, for dead animals or fragments of dead animals that get washed into these holes and covered up.
And that is apparently what happened to this 2 million plus year old giant land sloth.
This guy is called Eremotherium eomigrans. He's one of the larger ground sloths. He's getting up, to in the range of elephant size. He stands about 13 feet, and a number of these things have been found out in the Newberry area. They often would fall into sinkholes or caves, and because of their size, they just couldn't get out. But that is lucky for us because what you wind up with is a perfectly preserved, complete skeleton.
And he is by no means alone.
The area we live in, North Central Florida, is actually a great area for finding fossils and is kind of a world center for paleontological research. In fact, just about everything every mounted skeleton in here is something that came from within 100 miles of the museum. The oldest fully mounted skeleton on the island is 20-odd million years ago. It's an oreodont, sort of like a primitive goat. It was found up near White Springs on the Suwannee River, in the Suwannee River. The big guy is a bear dog. It's called Amphission. And he's a little bit later on, but he's still pretty old for Florida. He's in the 20 million year range. And he's attacking a primitive horse, which is actually no bigger than that oreodont, no bigger than a medium-sized dog. The bird is one of the most interesting things on the island. This species walked up a few million years ago and wound up in Florida. It's called Titanus. It's mostly a steel sculpture because the remains that we've actually found of the creature are incomplete. They're scrappy, but they're definitely from a giant bird, a giant carnivorous bird. He's threatening a tapir, which is something else that's found in Florida, but originally evolved in South America.
It is not only animal and plant life that has shaped our natural history, it is also people. The influential Calusa Indians lived in South Florida as far back as 4000 BC and were encountered by Spanish explorers in the 16th century. Some of their culture is recreated at the museum.
Because the Spanish encountered them, we tend to know a lot more about the Calusa than we do some of the other Native American tribes that had since been absorbed or vanished before the arrival of the European Spanish. Certainly there's those records, both descriptive and in some cases with some sketches, tell us about the tattooing of the body, about the kinds of head ornaments and other objects that were worn. So there's less conjecture here than when, for example, in the museum we speak of the Timucua Indians who lived up in this part of Florida near Gainesville.
The museum also has a lot to teach us about the biodiversity of the world we live in today, with faithful recreations of some distinctly Floridian natural environments.
One of the things that we do a lot of at the museum is to create these full-scale dioramas or maybe immersion environments. This is one of my favorites. This is a Northwest Florida pitcher plant bog, and believe it or not, Florida is the worldwide center for pitcher plant biodiversity. And if you've seen pitcher plants, they're really interesting shaped plants that capture insects to supplement their diet because they live in nutrient-poor soils.
The museum also painstakingly reproduces a North Central Florida limestone cave environment and magnifies the underwater world of a Florida mangrove swamp 10 times to give the patrons an up-close and personal look at some of the sea's smallest denizens.
It's like walking into a three-dimensional microscopic vision of the underwater world here along the coast of Florida.
The goal is to allow the exhibits to enrich lives by providing a deeper understanding of the world around us, both through permanent exhibits and visiting programs, many focusing on the world beyond Florida, like Amazon Voyage, Vicious Fishes, and other riches. As the museum's collection and body of research continues to grow, so does the museum's scope. No longer only relevant to Florida, it is now delving even deeper into the mysteries of the natural world.
Our scientists are doing research. We have these vast collections. Many of the stuff, the materials in the collection comes not just from the southeastern United States and the Caribbean, but from all over the world. And I think what that does for us is it gives us an opportunity to move out beyond Florida story, which is primarily what our permanent exhibits are, and take a look at the whole issue of biodiversity from a global perspective.
And as the museum increasingly considers the bigger biodiversity picture, Florida's role in the world's ecology becomes a little bit clearer.
It's all part of that jigsaw puzzle that we are trying to put together with the pieces that we have.
For County Update, I'm Alan Yetter.